They thought you were weak. They mistook your silence for insecurity. They saw your patience and labeled it passivity. They watched you endure, absorb, and step back, and they assumed you had nothing inside. But what if your silence was never weakness? What if it was containment? There is a moment in every person's life when something dormant begins to stir. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet awakening, a shift in awareness, a realization that you were never small, you were simply unrecognized. And when that awakening happens, everything changes. Have you ever noticed how the strongest foundations are hidden underground? No one applauds them. No one photographs them. Yet without them, nothing stands. In the same way, some people are built in silence. They are shaped by hardship, refined by misunderstanding, strengthened by being overlooked. People often judge by surface energy. If you are loud, you are confident. If you are aggressive, you are powerful. If you demand attention, you must be important. But what about the ones who observe before they speak? The ones who calculate before they move? The ones who endure without complaint? Why is restraint so often mistaken for weakness? The truth is, growth rarely announces itself. The seed does not break the soil on the first day. It remains buried unseen, pressed by darkness. And yet, beneath the surface, transformation is happening. Roots are forming. Strength is developing. Structure is building. Some people see the soil and assume nothing is there. They walk over it. They dismiss it. They underestimate it, until it breaks through. You have likely experienced this in your own life. Moments when others doubted you. Times when they spoke over you, dismissed your ideas, or questioned your ability. Maybe they thought you were too quiet, too kind, too reserved to make an impact. But what they didn't see was the internal construction, the late nights of reflection, the silent battles you fought, the discipline you built when no one was watching, the resilience formed from setbacks that could have broken you. Strength developed privately is often the most dangerous kind, not dangerous in harm, but powerful in presence, because when it finally reveals itself, it doesn't need validation. It doesn't seek applause. It simply stands. Ask yourself this. What if being underestimated was preparation? When people expect little from you, they place no ceiling on you. There are no heavy expectations to carry, no public spotlight distorting your focus. You are free to grow authentically, free to experiment, free to fail quietly and refine yourself without pressure. And while others are busy performing, you are building. There is something profound about quiet endurance. It forces you inward. It compels you to confront your fears, your insecurities, your doubts. You either crumble under them, or you refine yourself through them. Many who are underestimated develop a depth others cannot replicate. They learn emotional control. They learn strategic patience. They learn when to move and when to wait. Is that weakness? Or is that mastery? History, philosophy, and human experience repeatedly show that underestimated individuals often become the most transformative forces in their environments. Not because they sought dominance, but because they cultivated substance. They didn't rush to prove themselves. They prepared, and preparation changes everything. There comes a day when the internal shift becomes visible, when your voice becomes steady, when your boundaries become firm, when your energy shifts from seeking approval to embodying self-respect, and the same people who once overlooked you begin to notice. What changed? They ask. But nothing changed overnight. What they are witnessing is not sudden strength. It is revealed strength. It is the awakening of something that was always there. And when that awakening happens, it doesn't scream. It doesn't boast. It simply walks into the room differently, Because you now understand something powerful. Silence was never your weakness. It was your preparation. There is a different kind of power that awakens when you stop trying to convince people of your worth. At first, being misunderstood can feel heavy. You replay conversations in your mind. You wonder if you should have spoken up more, defended yourself harder, proved yourself louder. You question whether staying composed made you look incapable. But then something shifts. You realize that constantly explaining yourself is a trap. It keeps you reactive. It keeps you seeking validation from people who already decided who they think you are. And the moment you step out of that cycle, something wakes up. Have you ever noticed how people become uncomfortable when you stop reacting the way they expect? When criticism no longer shakes you, when sarcasm no longer provokes you, when exclusion no longer diminishes you, suddenly the dynamic changes. Why? Because the version of you they understood was predictable. The quiet one, the agreeable one, the one who absorbs tension to keep the peace. When that version evolves into someone centered, someone aware, someone steady, it disrupts the roles people assign to you. This awakening is not about becoming louder. It is about becoming grounded. Grounded in your values, grounded in your boundaries, grounded in your self-perception. When you were trying to prove yourself, you were giving others control over your emotional climate. A compliment lifted you, a dismissal crushed you, a small acknowledgement felt like victory. But now, you are no longer negotiating your worth based on external reactions. That is when real strength becomes visible. Think about it. The calmest person in the room is often the most aware. They observe tone shifts. They notice patterns. They understand motivations. They are not rushing to speak because they are processing. They are not quick to anger because they are calculating impact. This is not weakness. It is discipline, and discipline is intimidating. Many people confuse emotional restraint with fear. They assume that if you do not retaliate, you are incapable. But what if you simply choose not to waste energy? What if you understand that not every battle deserves your response? Self-control is a form of power that takes years to build. It requires self-awareness. It requires humility. It requires confronting your own ego and asking difficult questions. Why does this comment trigger me? Why do I feel the need to prove this point? What am I truly protecting? When you answer those questions honestly, something matures within you. And maturity changes how you carry yourself. Your posture shifts. Your words become intentional. Your presence becomes measured. You no longer chase conversations, you contribute to them. You no longer argue to win, you speak to clarify. You no longer fear silence, you use it. This is the awakening they did not anticipate, because when someone they labeled as weak becomes composed, firm, and unshaken, it forces them to reconsider their assumptions. The power dynamic they relied on quietly dissolves. Have you felt that moment? When someone who once dismissed you suddenly chooses their words more carefully. When their tone softens. When their confidence around you shifts. That is not coincidence. That is recognition. Recognition that you are no longer operating from insecurity. And here is the deeper truth. The awakening is not about proving them wrong. It is about proving yourself right. It is about realizing that your patience was not passivity. Your quiet was not emptiness. Your restraint was not fear. It was development. Do not multitask. There is a profound difference between someone who is silent because they feel small and someone who is silent because they are observing. The first is shrinking. The second is studying. When this awareness clicks, you stop shrinking. You start choosing. You choose when to speak. You choose when to disengage. You choose where to invest energy. You choose who has access to your vulnerability. Choice is power, and power rooted in self-knowledge is stable. It does not fluctuate with gossip. It does not collapse under criticism. It does not inflate with praise. It remains steady. So when people say, "You've changed," what they often mean is, "I can no longer control how you see yourself." And that is the awakening, not a transformation into someone else, but a return to who you were beneath the doubt, beneath the labels, beneath the underestimation. They thought you were weak because they only saw the surface. They never imagined what was building underneath. There is a moment in every awakening when you realize the greatest shift did not happen around you. It happened within you. The external world may look the same people, the same environment, the same conversations, but your interpretation changes. And when interpretation changes, reality feels different. Before, you may have internalized disrespect. You may have taken dismissal personally. You may have questioned your value when others failed to see it. But now, you pause, you assess. You understand that how people treat you often reveals more about them than about you. That realization is liberating. Have you ever noticed how much energy we spend trying to correct how others perceive us? We adjust our tone. We soften our opinions. We minimize our achievements so we do not intimidate. We overextend ourselves to avoid being misunderstood. But what happens when you stop? When you no longer twist yourself into acceptable shapes, something powerful settles in. Clarity. You begin to see where you were overcompensating. You notice where you were shrinking to make others comfortable. And instead of resentment, you feel awareness. Awareness is transformative, because once you see your patterns, you can no longer unsee them. You recognize when you are about to apologize unnecessarily. You catch yourself before volunteering for emotional labor that drains you. You become conscious of the subtle ways you once betrayed your own boundaries, and you choose differently. This is the phase where your strength becomes internal alignment. Your words match your values. Your actions reflect your standards. You are no longer performing kindness while harboring exhaustion. You are no longer pretending indifference while feeling disrespected. You address things calmly, directly, without aggression but without fear. That balance unsettles people who benefited from your silence. Why? Because clarity removes ambiguity. When you were unsure of yourself, others could define you. When you were hesitant, others could dominate the pace. But when you become internally aligned, your energy communicates certainty before you even speak. Certainty does not shout. It stands. Think about the last time you encountered someone who was deeply self-assured. They did not need to interrupt. They did not need to boast. Their confidence was quiet but undeniable. It came from knowing who they were and what they would tolerate. That is what has woken up inside you. Not arrogance, not superiority, but self-respect. Self-respect shifts your decisions. It changes who you allow close. It alters how long you entertain negativity. It influences the opportunities you pursue and the ones you decline. You begin to understand that access to you is a privilege, not a right. And with that understanding comes responsibility. Because awakening is not just about power. It is about control. Emotional control, verbal control, strategic control. You realize that reacting impulsively diminishes your growth. So you respond intentionally. You speak less, but when you speak, it carries weight. You withdraw from drama, not out of fear, but out of discernment. You walk away when necessary, not because you cannot handle conflict, but because you value your peace. Have you noticed how different conflict feels now? Before, It may have triggered anxiety or defensiveness. Now, it feels like information, a chance to evaluate character, a moment to observe how others handle pressure. Your awakening gives you perspective. Perspective allows you to detach from emotional manipulation. When someone tries to provoke you, you recognize it as insecurity. When someone attempts to belittle you, you see projection. When someone distances themselves because you no longer play small, you understand it as discomfort with your growth. And instead of shrinking to restore familiarity, you remain steady. This steadiness is what they did not expect. They expected you to remain reactive, to remain uncertain, to remain in need of validation. They did not anticipate that you would become self-validating. And once that happens, the foundation of external control collapses. You no longer need approval to move forward. You no longer wait for permission to elevate your standards. You no longer delay decisions because someone might misunderstand you. You trust your judgment. That trust is the true awakening. It is not about changing who you are. It is about removing the doubt that distorted who you were becoming. They thought you were weak because you were evolving quietly. But now the evolution is visible, and it is undeniable. And now we arrive at the part they never prepared for. When strength becomes consistent, it is one thing to awaken. It is another thing to sustain it. Anyone can feel motivated for a moment. Anyone can decide, in a surge of emotion, that they will no longer tolerate disrespect. But lasting power is not built on emotion. It is built on discipline. This is where the true transformation becomes undeniable. You are no longer reacting from wounded pride. You are operating from clarity. You are no longer trying to shock people with your growth. You are simply living it, quietly, repeatedly, consistently. And consistency is what changes reputations. Have you noticed how people slowly adjust around you? The jokes become fewer. The dismissive tone softens. The assumptions fade. It is not because you demanded it aggressively. It is because your energy no longer invites it. Energy is shaped by standards. When you raise your internal standards, the external world recalibrates. Not always immediately, not always willingly, but inevitably, because people respond to patterns. And when your pattern becomes self-respect, calm authority, and measured responses, it rewrites the script others had for you. They thought you were weak because you did not compete for dominance. But you were never trying to dominate. You were building capacity. Capacity to handle pressure without collapsing. Capacity to listen without absorbing negativity. Capacity to stand alone without feeling abandoned. That kind of capacity cannot be faked. It is earned through reflection, restraint, and repeated choice. Choice is where your power now lives. You choose growth over ego. You choose silence over pointless debate. You choose long-term dignity over short-term satisfaction. And these choices compound. Day after day, interaction after interaction. Soon, the narrative around you changes. Not because you corrected it with arguments, but because your behavior contradicted it consistently. Think about how powerful that is. Instead of defending your strength, you demonstrated it. Instead of announcing your boundaries, you enforced them calmly. Instead of demanding recognition, you became undeniable. There is a profound difference between being loud and being solid. Loudness seeks attention. Solidity commands respect. And respect earned through stability lasts longer than fear earned through intimidation. Have you realized how much lighter you feel? When you stop chasing approval, your mind becomes clearer. When you stop internalizing criticism, your focus sharpens. When you stop proving, you start progressing. This is the real awakening, not a dramatic confrontation, not a public declaration, but a private decision repeated until it becomes identity. You are no longer the person who absorbs every opinion. You are no longer the person who shrinks in uncomfortable rooms. You are no longer waiting for someone to validate your potential. You understand your value, and that understanding anchors you. Anchored people do not drift with every comment. Anchored people do not panic when misunderstood. Anchored people move with intention, and intention is visible. The same individuals who once underestimated you now feel the shift. Some may admire it. Some may resent it. Some may distance themselves because your growth challenges their comfort. But none of that destabilizes you anymore, because this awakening was never about them. It was about alignment. Alignment between who you are internally and how you present yourself externally. Alignment between your values and your actions. Alignment between your potential and your discipline. When alignment happens, weakness disappears, not because you become invincible, but because you become integrated. Integrated people are difficult to shake. So let them remember the version of you that seemed quiet, uncertain, or accommodating. That version was not weakness, it was preparation. It was construction. It was the unseen phase of development. Now, what has woken up is clarity, self-respect, composure, strategic patience, and once those qualities are activated, they do not go back to sleep. They thought you were weak, until this woke up. And now, you do not need to convince anyone of anything. Your presence speaks for itself. There is one final layer to this awakening that few people talk about. It is the realization that your strength was never meant to be used for revenge. When you first recognize your growth, there can be a temptation, a desire to show people what they missed, to subtly remind them how they underestimated you, to let your success become a silent, "I told you so." But true evolution moves differently. Real strength does not seek to embarrass those who doubted it. It seeks to transcend the need for their acknowledgement altogether. Ask yourself honestly, if no one ever admitted they were wrong about you, would your growth still be worth it? If the answer is yes, then your awakening is authentic, because the highest form of power is independence from external validation. It is reaching a point where your progress is no longer fueled by proving others wrong, but by becoming more aligned with your own potential. When this stage activates, your focus sharpens even further. You stop scanning rooms to see who is watching. You stop measuring your success against past critics. You stop replaying old dismissals in your mind. The past loses its emotional charge. Why? Because you understand something deeper now. Underestimation was part of the process. It gave you space to grow without interference. It revealed who believed in you and who projected their limitations onto you. It taught you emotional regulation. It forced you to cultivate resilience internally instead of depending on applause. Without that phase, would you have developed the same discipline, the same awareness, the same self-trust? Probably not. Sometimes being overlooked is protection. Sometimes being doubted is redirection. Sometimes being underestimated is preparation for a responsibility you could not have handled earlier, and this perspective transforms resentment into gratitude. Not gratitude for disrespect, but gratitude for growth. When you shift into this mindset, your energy becomes different again. Softer, yet stronger. Calm, yet decisive. You no longer carry the heaviness of past misunderstandings. You carry lessons. Lessons about patience. Lessons about discernment. Lessons about timing. You begin to understand that not everyone who doubted you was malicious. Some simply could not see beyond their own framework. Some judged based on limited information. Some projected their fears onto you, because your potential unsettled them. And instead of holding bitterness, you release it. Release is power, because holding on to past underestimation keeps you emotionally tied to it. Releasing it frees your attention for higher focus, bigger goals, deeper impact. Have you noticed how much clearer your path feels now? When you are no longer distracted by proving, competing, or correcting perceptions, your energy becomes available for creation, for innovation, for leadership, for service, for contribution. Your awakening was not just about personal confidence. It was about capacity to contribute at a higher level. And here is the final truth. The strongest individuals are not those who were never doubted. They are the ones who were doubted, refined themselves quietly, and emerged without losing their integrity. Integrity is the ultimate proof of strength. You did not become harsh. You did not become arrogant. You did not become reactive. You became composed. You became intentional. You became aware. That is evolution, and evolution does not need to announce itself loudly. It reveals itself in standards, in consistency, in emotional intelligence, in quiet authority. The people who once thought you were weak may never fully understand what shifted. They may only sense that something is different, something solid, something grounded. But you know that what woke up inside you was self-recognition. You stopped waiting to be seen and started seeing yourself clearly. And when a person truly sees their own value, they move differently. They speak differently. They decide differently. They live differently. Not for approval, not for applause, but from alignment. They thought you were weak because they misread your silence. They mistook your patience for passivity. They confused your restraint with fear, until this woke up. And now, you do not need to correct the narrative. You embody a new one.